It started with a failure, not a small one. A system so advanced, so expensive, that when they turned it on, it collapsed. Live, suitcases ripped apart, metal tracks screaming, clothes scattered across the floor like something had gone wrong. Deep inside the machine, engineers couldn't stop it, they couldn't explain it. And that was just the part they showed on camera. Because beneath this airport, there are miles of tunnels, not just a few service corridors, but an entire underground network, stretching far beyond what passengers ever see. Most people walk above it, every day, completely unaware. But some workers started asking questions. Why was so much of it hidden? Why were entire sections sealed off before the airport even opened? And why did a project this big go so wrong? When Denver International Airport finally opened in 1995, it was already delayed, over budget, and surrounded by quiet rumors. Outside, a towering blue horse stands frozen mid-charge, its glowing red eyes staring directly at arriving passengers. Inside, murals depict scenes that don't belong in an airport. War, chaos, masked figures. And near the entrance, a stone, a dedication, with a name that doesn't officially exist. No records, no clear origin, just a message. And then there's what lies underneath. Because officially, those tunnels are for trains, for baggage, but not everyone believes that. Some think something else was built down there, something never meant to be seen. Because when you start connecting the failures, the symbols, the design choices, a different picture begins to form. One that doesn't look like an airport at all. So the question isn't just what went wrong here, it's what were they really trying to build? Long before the murals, before the red-eyed horse, before the conspiracy theories, there was a simple problem. Denver was growing, and its airport wasn't. In the early 1980s, Stapleton International Airport had already been operating for more than 6 decades. It had served Denver since 1929, and for years it handled the city's air traffic without major issues. But by 1980, things were changing. Denver's population was expanding rapidly. Airlines were adding more routes. Passenger numbers kept climbing every year, and Stapleton was slowly reaching its limits. The airport sat surrounded by neighborhoods and highways. Expanding it further would have meant relocating thousands of residents and businesses, something city planners knew would be politically and financially impossible. But there was another issue, one that pilots knew all too well: wind. Denver sits on the open plains east of the Rocky Mountains. The region experiences powerful crosswinds that often forced aircraft to delay takeoffs or landings when runways couldn't align with the wind direction. At Stapleton, the runway layout simply wasn't flexible enough to handle those conditions. Delays became common. So in 1980, the Denver Regional Council of Governments began quietly studying potential locations for a completely new airport, not an expansion. A replacement. The idea sounded radical at the time. Why abandon a functioning airport and build another one from scratch? The debate continued for several years. Politicians argued. Airlines weighed in. Residents worried about cost. Then in 1983, Denver's mayor Federico Peña stepped forward with a bold proposal. Stapleton, he argued, had no long-term future. If Denver wanted to become a major international aviation hub, it needed something far larger, something built for the future. Peña proposed constructing an entirely new airport, far from the city center, out on the open prairie northeast of Denver, a place where land was cheap, space was endless, and runways could be built without limits. But the scale of what he proposed was staggering. The planned site would cover 54 square miles. To put that into perspective, that's larger than the entire island of Manhattan. Few airports anywhere in the world operated on that kind of land. So why build something so enormous? City planners had a clear answer: flexibility. Instead of parallel runways packed tightly together, engineers could design a pinwheel layout, multiple runways spread in different directions so aircraft could take off, even during strong crosswinds. Technically, it made perfect sense. But convincing the public was another matter. Critics warned the project would be wildly expensive. Some argued the city should simply upgrade Stapleton instead. The political fight dragged on for years. Finally, in 1988, Denver voters were asked to decide, should the city annex the vast prairie land needed for the airport and move forward with construction? The vote passed, and with it, the largest infrastructure project in Colorado history officially began. To fund the construction, the city secured a $500 million federal grant and issued massive municipal bonds. But even that was only the beginning. Because building the airport meant transforming miles of untouched prairie into one of the most complex transportation hubs on Earth. In September 1989, construction crews finally broke ground. At first glance, the site looked simple: flat land, grass, open sky. But transforming that landscape into an airport required an almost unimaginable amount of earth moving. Over the next few years, workers excavated and graded more than 110 million cubic yards of soil. Bulldozers reshaped the plains. Roads were carved into the ground. Foundations stretched across miles of empty land. And during the excavation, workers made an unexpected discovery: fossils buried deep beneath the prairie soil. Ancient remains of animals that had lived there thousands of years earlier. The findings were significant, enough that some of the fossils would later be displayed inside the airport itself during its 25th anniversary. A quiet reminder that this land had its own long history, long before airplanes arrived. But as construction moved forward in the early 1990s, something else was happening behind the scenes. Engineers and planners weren't just building a new airport. They were trying to build the most technologically advanced airport ever designed. A place where everything, from aircraft movement to passenger baggage, would be controlled by automated systems. Machines would move luggage across miles of track. Computers would coordinate logistics across multiple terminals. It sounded revolutionary. And in theory, it would make Denver International Airport one of the most efficient airports in the world. But revolutionary ideas often come with risks. And as the construction crews continued building the terminals and runways, one decision would quietly set the stage for one of the biggest engineering disasters in aviation history. Because Denver wasn't just building a large airport. They were trying to build the smartest airport ever created. But was the technology ready for that kind of ambition? Or had the city just committed billions of dollars to an idea that was about to spiral out of control? By the early 1990s, the new airport rising from the Colorado plains was already becoming one of the most ambitious construction projects in the United States. Runways stretched for miles across the prairie. A massive terminal was rising in the center of the site, the Yepesen Terminal, designed by architect Curtis Fentress. Its roof would become one of the airport's most recognizable features: a vast white tensile canopy made from PTFE-coated fiberglass, covering nearly 375,000 square feet. 34 steel columns supported the structure, while more than 10 miles of steel cabling pulled the roof tight, creating peaks designed to resemble the snow-covered Rocky Mountains. Inside, the main hall, known as the Great Hall, would rise 126 feet high, filled with natural light. On paper, it looked extraordinary. But the real revolution of Denver International Airport wasn't the architecture. It was happening underground. City planners wanted something no major airport had ever attempted before: a fully automated baggage system that would connect every terminal and airline. The idea sounded simple. Instead of thousands of airport workers manually sorting luggage, machines would do everything. As soon as a passenger checked in a suitcase, it would be placed on a computer-controlled cart. That cart would travel through a network of tunnels beneath the airport, racing across miles of track at speeds of 15 to 20 miles per hour. Sensors would read the bag's barcode. Computers would guide the cart to the correct aircraft gate. Then the bag would be automatically delivered to the plane. No delays. No human sorting. Just automation. In 1990, Denver hired the consulting firm Breyer Nidal Petroni to study how such a system might work. At first, airlines planned to install separate baggage systems for their own terminals. But by 1991, a new idea emerged. Why not combine everything into one massive airport-wide system? The concept promised efficiency, but it also meant something else: complexity. Still, the plan moved forward. In December 1991, Denver awarded the contract to BAE Automated Systems, a company that had previously built baggage systems for United Airlines. Their proposal was enormous. More than 17 miles of track, around 5.5 miles of conveyor belts, and nearly 4,000 small robotic carts, known as telecarts, moving bags across the airport. Each cart could carry up to 20 bags at a time. Photocells and scanners would guide them through tunnels and switching tracks beneath the concourses. If it worked, it would become the largest automated baggage system ever built. But there was a problem. The airport itself was still under construction, and yet, many of the final design decisions for the baggage system hadn't even been completed. Instead of designing the system first, engineers were trying to integrate it into buildings that were already being constructed, a dangerous approach for something this complex. Still, construction continued. By 1992, the project was racing forward. Then something unexpected happened. In October 1992, Walter Singer, the airport's chief engineer and one of the strongest advocates of the automated baggage system, had died suddenly. Singer had been one of the few people who fully understood the enormous technical challenge the system represented. With him gone, the project lost one of its key voices, and the timing couldn't have been worse, because by 1993, problems were already beginning to appear. Construction delays started piling up. Airlines requested last-minute changes. Security rules shifted, requiring modifications to conveyor layouts and baggage screening. Each change forced engineers to redesign parts of the system. Meanwhile, tensions began rising between contractors, airlines, and city officials. Deadlines moved, budgets expanded, and the airport's opening date, originally scheduled for October 1993, was pushed back, first to March 1994, then again to May 15, 1994. Behind the scenes, engineers were racing to make the automated system actually work. But the first full public test would reveal just how serious the problems had become. In April 1994, city officials invited reporters to watch a live demonstration of the baggage system. Television cameras lined the test area. The idea was simple: show the world the future of airport technology. But within minutes, things began to go wrong. Carts slammed into each other. Sensors failed to read luggage tags. Suitcases flew off conveyor belts. One bag smashed open, spilling clothes across the floor. Another cart derailed completely. Reporters watched as baggage tumbled through the system like debris in a storm. The machines kept jamming, over and over again. What was supposed to be a triumphant reveal quickly turned into a disaster. City officials called it a debacle. The footage aired on television across the country. And suddenly, the world was watching. But this wasn't just an embarrassing moment. It was a warning. Because if the baggage system didn't work, the airport itself couldn't open. And engineers were starting to realize something deeply troubling. This wasn't just a small technical issue. The entire system might be fundamentally broken. So the question was no longer when Denver International Airport would open. The real question had become something far more serious. Had the city just built a $4 billion airport that couldn't function at all? Even before Denver International Airport officially opened, people were already talking about something unusual. Not the runways, not the delays. The art. Airports around the world display paintings and sculptures. It's normal. Usually the pieces celebrate travel, culture, local history. But when visitors first walked through the halls of Denver International Airport in the mid-1990s, some of the artwork made them stop and stare, because the imagery didn't look like typical airport decoration. It looked unsettling. One of the most talked about pieces sits inside the terminal corridors. Two enormous murals painted by artist Leo Tanguma. Their titles sound peaceful enough. Children of the world dream of peace, and in peace and harmony with nature. But standing in front of them, the scenes feel far more complicated. On one side of the mural, a towering soldier dominates the composition. He wears a gas mask, a long coat, and holds a sword. Around him, the world appears broken. Buildings burn, animals lie dead, people mourn, children weep over coffins. The imagery is dramatic, almost apocalyptic. Then, on the opposite side of the same mural, the tone suddenly changes. Children from different cultures gather together. Weapons are destroyed. Animals return. Nature begins to heal. According to Leo Tanguma, the meaning was always clear. The murals were meant to tell a story, a warning about the destruction caused by war. and a hopeful vision of peace if humanity chooses a different path. But not everyone saw it that way, because when visitors first encountered those images in an airport terminal, they began asking questions. Why place scenes of war and death in a building meant for travel? Why show masked soldiers towering over children? And why did the imagery feel almost prophetic? Soon photographs of the murals began spreading online. Some viewers started interpreting them very differently. To conspiracy theorists, the soldier looked disturbingly similar to a Nazi-style figure. Others claimed the scenes represented a future global catastrophe. A few went even further and suggesting the murals were predicting a new world order rising after a global disaster. Tanguma himself later reacted bluntly when he heard these theories. He said when people told him his murals were secret warnings, his first thought was simple: these people are deranged. To him, the message was always about hope. But the murals weren't the only artwork sparking speculation. Near the baggage claim areas of the airport, travelers sometimes noticed something strange perched above the hallways. Two small statues, watching over the room. They look like gargoyles. Each one sits atop a column, holding luggage in its claws. The sculptures are known as Notre Denver. Traditionally, gargoyles in medieval architecture were meant to protect buildings, symbolic guardians meant to ward off evil spirits. At DIA, the idea was playful. The gargoyles were meant to protect travelers' baggage. But to some visitors, their presence inside a modern airport felt odd. Why decorate an airport with creatures? Traditionally associated with ancient cathedrals? Why give them luggage to guard? And why did so many other strange artistic choices appear throughout the building? Elsewhere in the terminal, a series of photographs by artist Alex Sweetman documented the airport's construction. Most of the images show normal scenes: prairie landscapes, wildlife, construction crews working in the open fields. But one photo caught particular attention: a field of sunflowers, wilted and dying. For most viewers, it was simply an artistic contrast. But online, speculation grew. Was it symbolic? A hidden message? A warning? Airport officials insisted there was no mystery. The art program at Denver International Airport had been designed to celebrate peace, nature, and cultural diversity. Nothing more. But once an idea begins spreading on the internet, it rarely disappears. Because when people saw the murals, the gargoyles, the unusual imagery, some began asking a larger question. Were these just misunderstood pieces of public art? Or were they symbols, placed here intentionally, messages hidden in plain sight, inside one of the largest airports on Earth? And if the art was strange, what stood outside the airport would make the rumors even louder, because looming near the entrance road, there was something else watching travelers arrive. A massive blue horse, 32 feet tall, with glowing red eyes, and the story behind that statue was far stranger than anyone expected. Long before travelers ever step inside the terminal at Denver International Airport, they see it, standing alone near the entrance road. Massive, unmistakable, a 32-foot tall horse, painted a deep cobalt blue, rearing high into the sky. And at night, its eyes glow bright red. For thousands of drivers approaching the airport each day, the statue appears suddenly against the open plains, watching, almost alive. Officially, the sculpture is called Mustang, but locals gave it another name, Blucifer, and the story behind it is one of the strangest chapters in the airport's history. The statue was originally commissioned in 1992 as part of Denver International Airport's public art program. The artist chosen for the project was Luis Jimenez, a well-known sculptor famous for creating large fiberglass works, inspired by American and Mexican cultural themes. At first, the plan had been completely different. Jimenez originally proposed a herd of buffalo, a tribute to the animals that once roamed the American West. But later the concept changed. Instead of buffalo, the airport would receive a single powerful Mustang, a symbol of the wild horses and frontier spirit of the region. The statue would be enormous, over 9,000 pounds of fiberglass and steel, towering high enough to be seen from the airport highway. Construction began in Jimenez's studio in New Mexico, but large sculptures take time. Years passed as the artist worked on the piece, layer by layer, assembling massive sections that would later be joined together. And then, in June 2006, tragedy struck. While working in his studio on one of the final sections of the horse, a huge piece of the sculpture suddenly fell. The fiberglass segment weighed around 800 pounds. It collapsed directly onto Jimenez. The impact pinned him against a steel support beam. The falling piece severed an artery in his leg. And despite attempts to save him, Luis Jimenez bled to death in his studio. The accident shocked the art world. New Mexico's governor even ordered flags to fly at half-mast in his honor. But the sculpture itself was still unfinished. And now that its creator was gone. At that moment, the project could easily have ended. But Jimenez's family and studio assistants made a different decision. They chose to complete the horse. Using the artist's designs and molds, they finished assembling the remaining sections. Finally, in February 2008, the statue was transported to Denver and installed outside the airport. 32 feet tall, muscular, rearing aggressively into the air. But the detail that caught everyone's attention was the eyes. Jimenez had designed them to glow red using internal lighting, inspired by the neon art and lowrider culture he admired. At night, the effect was striking. The horse's eyes burned like red fire in the darkness. Some people loved the sculpture. Others hated it. And almost immediately, rumors began spreading. Because to many observers, the statue didn't look heroic. It looked terrifying. Its expression seemed angry, its posture aggressive, and the glowing eyes gave it an almost supernatural presence. But what truly fueled the legend was the story of the accident. The fact that the sculpture had killed its own creator. Suddenly, the nickname Blucifer began appearing everywhere. Locals joked the statue was cursed. Others pointed out that its red eyes made it resemble one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, a symbol of death. Some conspiracy theories went even further, claiming the statue represented a dark guardian, protecting something hidden beneath the airport. Of course, airport officials dismissed the rumors. To them, Mustang was simply a powerful piece of public art honoring the American West. The accident that killed Jimenez had been tragic, but purely accidental. Still, the symbolism was hard to ignore. A towering horse, glowing eyes, a sculpture associated with death, standing guard outside one of the most mysterious airports in America. And for many visitors, the statue felt less like a welcome sign and more like a warning. But as strange as the horse might seem, the real mystery wasn't standing above the ground. It was buried beneath it. Because under Denver International Airport, there exists an entire network of tunnels. Some are visible to passengers, most are not. And for years, those underground spaces have fueled some of the most persistent conspiracy theories surrounding the airport. So the next question became unavoidable. How much of Denver International Airport was actually hidden underground? Airports are complicated places. Passengers usually see only a small part of them. The gates, the terminals, the runways stretching into the distance. But beneath most large airports, there is another world. Service tunnels, maintenance corridors, utility networks. And at Denver International Airport, that underground world is unusually large. Beneath the terminals, a network of tunnels stretches across the airport grounds.
Some of them were built for transportation,
Others for baggage, and a few for systems the public rarely sees. One of the most visible underground features today is the airport rail system. In April 2016, Denver opened the University of Colorado A-Line, a commuter train connecting the airport directly to Union Station in downtown Denver. The ride takes about 37 minutes. Passengers arriving by train step directly into the airport's transit center, located beneath the massive Westin Hotel that now stands beside the Yepesen Terminal. It's one of the few major American airports where travelers can move seamlessly from train to plane. But long before the train system existed, underground space had already been built beneath the airport. Originally, those tunnels were meant to serve something far more ambitious, the automated baggage system. When engineers designed Denver's futuristic baggage network in the early 1990s, they needed room for miles of track and conveyor belts. So they built a series of corridors and chambers below the concourses. In theory, thousands of robotic carts would race through those tunnels, carrying luggage between terminals. But when the system collapsed during testing, those underground spaces were left partially unused. Some were repurposed. Others remained largely empty. And that's where the speculation began, because the scale of the airport itself was already enormous. Denver International Airport sits on 33 square miles of land. That's larger than Manhattan. To some observers, the size seemed excessive. Why build an airport that big? Then people learned about the underground tunnels, and a new theory started to spread. What if those tunnels were built for something else? Rumors began circulating online. Some claimed the tunnels connected to secret underground bunkers. Others suggested they were part of an emergency government shelter system. A few even speculated that the airport linked directly to NORAD, the massive military command center buried inside Cheyenne Mountain near Colorado Springs. According to these theories, Denver International Airport wasn't just an airport. It was a hidden command center, or a survival bunker for powerful elites in case of global catastrophe. But when investigators and journalists examined the claims, they found something much less dramatic. Yes, the airport does have underground spaces, but most of them extend only a couple of miles at most, mainly beneath the concourses. They house maintenance rooms, utility lines, and the remains of the old baggage infrastructure. The commuter rail system added more tunnels later, but those are publicly documented. No evidence has ever surfaced showing vast hidden bunkers or secret military bases beneath the airport. Even airport officials have occasionally addressed the rumors with humor. They have acknowledged that some graffiti found in the tunnels, drawings of aliens and lizard people, were simply pranks by workers. Still, the theories refuse to disappear, partly because airports rarely reveal every detail of their internal infrastructure, and partly because the airport's design contains other features that people find unusual. For example, the layout of the runways themselves. From the air, the pattern looks strangely familiar to some observers, enough that it sparked one of the most controversial conspiracy theories about the airport, a theory suggesting the design wasn't accidental at all, but intentional. Which raises another question. When viewed from above, does the layout of Denver International Airport really resemble something far darker than a simple runway system? Or is it just another coincidence, waiting to be misunderstood? By the time Denver International Airport finally opened in February 1995, the project had already become one of the most controversial construction efforts in American aviation. The airport was 16 months behind schedule. The final cost had ballooned to roughly $4.8 billion, nearly 3 times the original estimate of $1.7 billion, and the highly advertised automated baggage system, once promoted as the future of airport technology, had already collapsed into chaos. For many people, that alone was enough to raise suspicion. How could a project with so many engineers, planners, and government officials involved go so wrong? But the theories didn't stop with construction problems. Soon, observers began looking at the airport itself, and what they saw from above. When viewed from satellite images or flight maps, the runways at Denver International Airport form a distinctive pattern, 5 long strips stretching outward from the center of the airfield. At first glance, it looks like a pinwheel, but to some observers, the pattern seemed disturbingly familiar. Online forums began circulating a strange claim that the runway layout resembled a swastika, the symbol associated with Nazi Germany. Images comparing the two began appearing across conspiracy websites and discussion boards. The implication was shocking. Why would an American airport be designed with a shape resembling such a symbol? Was it intentional or just coincidence? Airport planners have always given a simple explanation. The runway layout was designed for crosswind efficiency. Because Denver sits on open plains where wind directions shift constantly, the airport needed multiple runway orientations. The pinwheel design allows aircraft to land or take off safely regardless of wind direction. In other words, the shape was purely functional. But once people began seeing patterns, they started noticing other details too. One of the most discussed objects sits near the Yepesen terminal entrance, a large granite capstone embedded in the floor. The stone marks the airport's dedication and includes a Masonic symbol, the familiar square and compass used by Freemasons. Beneath it are several inscriptions, including the date the stone was placed, and the name of an organization that immediately caught the attention of conspiracy theorists, the New World Airport Commission. To some observers, that name sounded suspiciously similar to something else. New World Order, a phrase often associated with secret global governments in conspiracy culture. So naturally, speculation exploded. Who were the members of this mysterious commission? Why had most people never heard of it? And why was it connected to the opening of one of the largest airports in the world? But historical records tell a far simpler story. The New World Airport Commission was a temporary arts and events committee formed to help organize the airport's opening celebrations in the early 1990s, it was chaired by Charles Ansbacher, a respected conductor with the Colorado Symphony. The name itself had nothing to do with politics. It came from Antonin Dvořák's famous composition, the New World Symphony. Even the capstone's contents were hardly mysterious. Inside the time capsule placed beneath it are everyday objects from the era. Coins, a baseball from Coors Field, and even a pair of campaign sneakers belonging to Denver Mayor Wellington Webb. Hardly the artifacts of a secret global government. Still, the theories continued spreading. Another rumor focused on strange markings embedded in the airport floors. Some tiles feature inscriptions written in Navajo language, words like Beshtit Gai, meaning white metal referencing silver. Others include symbols representing Colorado's mining history, including the chemical symbols Au and Ag, gold and silver. But online speculation quickly twisted the meaning. One viral theory claimed the letters Au Ag referred to something called Australian antigen, supposedly a biological weapon. In reality, the markings were simply a tribute to the state's mining heritage. The Navajo inscriptions were included to honor indigenous culture and regional history, yet even the smallest details seemed to fuel new interpretations. A scene in the 1977 film, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, became part of the speculation too. In the movie, a mysterious radio signal transmits a set of geographic coordinates. Some internet users claimed those numbers pointed directly to Denver International Airport. But when researchers checked the coordinates, they actually matched a small town called Alt, Colorado, about 65 miles north of the airport. Still, the rumors persisted, because once a place gains a reputation for mystery, every symbol, every coincidence, every unusual design choice becomes part of the story. But beneath all the speculation, there is another layer, one built entirely from documented events, real engineering failures, real accidents, real decisions that shaped the airport's troubled history. And when those facts are laid out carefully, they tell a story that is almost as dramatic as the conspiracy theories themselves, which leads to the final question. After decades of rumors, speculation, and strange coincidences, what is the actual truth behind Denver International Airport? In the end, Denver International Airport is both exactly what it appears to be and something far more complicated, because behind the murals, the red-eyed horse, the tunnels, and the endless speculation, there is a documented story, a story of ambition and of mistakes. When the airport finally opened on February 28, 1995, more than 11,000 workers had been involved in the final rush to finish construction. The first aircraft to depart was United Airlines Flight 1062, heading to Kansas City. Moments later, another United flight from Colorado Springs became the first to arrive. After years of delays, Denver finally had its new airport, and by almost every measurable standard, it was enormous. The airport covered 33 square miles of land. 5 runways stretched across the plains. One of them, runway 16R34L, extended an astonishing 16,000 feet, making it one of the longest commercial runways in North America. At an elevation of 6,155 feet above sea level, the length was necessary to help aircraft take off in the thinner mountain air. Inside the terminal, the sweeping roof of the Great Hall rose like a white mountain range. Sunlight poured through its translucent panels. Passengers moved beneath the peaks as if walking through a futuristic landscape. Despite the troubled construction, the airport itself worked. Planes arrived. Flights departed. Millions of passengers began passing through the building every year. But one major piece of the original vision never recovered: the automated baggage system. After the disastrous testing in 1994, airport officials were forced to improvise. Instead of relying on automation, workers manually sorted luggage using temporary conveyor belts and carts. The massive robotic network beneath the airport remained mostly unused. Engineers kept trying to repair the system for years, but the problems never truly disappeared. Carts continued to jam. Sensors failed. Bags were misrouted. Maintenance costs soared. By the early 2000s, the system was costing the airport nearly $1 million per month just to keep it operational. Finally, in August 2005, the decision was made. The automated system would be permanently abandoned. After more than a decade of effort, the futuristic network was shut down and replaced with a conventional, manual sorting process. In total, the failed project had consumed roughly $32 to $38 million. For many engineers, it became a famous case study in how complex systems can fail when planning and construction overlap. But even as the technical problems faded into history, the legends surrounding the airport continued to grow. Visitors still stopped to photograph the glowing red eyes of the Blue Mustang. Travelers still debate the meaning of Leo Tanguma's murals. And online, the same theories continue circulating. Underground bunkers, secret societies, hidden symbols. Yet when historians examine the evidence, the explanations remain surprisingly ordinary. The New World Airport Commission was simply an arts committee organizing the airport's opening celebration. The Navajo inscriptions reference silver and mountain landscapes. The runway layout was designed for crosswind safety, and the tunnels beneath the airport were originally built for a baggage system that simply didn't work. In other words, Denver International Airport may not hide a secret government bunker or a gateway to a hidden world beneath the plains. But that doesn't mean the story is any less fascinating, because sometimes the real mystery isn't about secret plots or hidden agendas. Sometimes it's about how massive human projects evolve, how ambitious ideas collide with reality, how design choices, accidents, and coincidences slowly build a mythology around a place. And once that mythology begins, it takes on a life of its own. Even today, millions of passengers pass through Denver International Airport every year without giving those details a second thought. But others look a little closer. At the murals, at the capstone, at the glowing eyes of the horse watching the highway, and they still wonder, was every strange detail truly accidental? Or did the airport's designer simply create something so unusual that people couldn't help imagining secrets behind it? Maybe the truth really is simple. Or maybe some places gather stories the moment they are built, and those stories never quite fade away. So the next time you pass through Denver International Airport, take a moment to look around, because beneath the terminals, behind the art, and inside the legends, there's a history far stranger than most travelers ever realize. And if you want to explore more hidden stories like this, subscribe, because some of the most fascinating mysteries in history are hiding in places we pass through every day.